Hi, my name is Andres Kulbergs. I'm an automotive expert and president of Latvian Automotive Association. I want to tell you a very interesting story from history. It's about the transportation of evolution. So, from horses to ice, internal combustion engines to electric mobility. So, everybody from media, politicians, researchers, public figures, bloggers, bureaucrats, and even Greta talks about car emissions, diesel NOx, CO2, particles, gases, pollution, city congestion, car combustion engine impact on health, and all other bad stuff. All media and social networks are filled with ever-repeating forums and conferences focusing with more drastic climate measures, diesel car banning, and ever-lowering CO2 emission limits. Cities already listed on 5 A4 pages restricting older diesel or even ICE cars from entering. Manufacturers have to build cars with choking engines and tons of engineering gizmos to keep them clean at 95 grams per kilometer of CO2 today, and hoping to last over the warranty period just to see that the DPF filters and catalyzers are being well cut out in Eastern Europe, turning them from Euro 5 to Euro 1 norm vehicles. Brands build their sport versions of RSs, M cars, S cars, AMGs, Cupras, GTs, 4Ss, and the rest of gas-guzzling sports versions to attract the customers to their showrooms and hope that they don't actually buy those versions them in order to be relieved from even greater penalties from EU. 22 countries have already announced deadlines for the last ICE vehicle being sold on their territory. EU is actually now in the final fight discussions to announce the Euro 7 norms, which by many car manufacturers being said will kill the ICE technology already after 2025. So no diesel, no petrol cars past that period. And diesels have already lost their face without a chance to make their last breath. Even motorsports are becoming toxic product and politically incorrect activities. Well, we measure what the cars eat and what they dispose and how long they live and what happens to them in their afterlife with the AOL end of life measures. The thing is that we all as global society have seen this before 2 centuries ago already. This history is repeating itself once more. Yes, back in the day, when horses were means of transport in ever-growing global cities, they become a curse of development and direct health threat to people due to their ever-growing emissions. Yes, you read it right, horse emissions. In 1898, delegates from across the globe gathered in New York City for the world's first international urban planning conference. One topic dominated the whole discussion. It was not housing, not land lease, not economic development or infrastructure. The delegates were driven to desperation by horse manure. Yes, horse shit, horse emissions. 1800s, the problem of horse pollution had reached unprecedented heights. Cities were drowning in horse manure, as well as other unpleasant byproducts of the era's predominant mode of transportation: urine, flies, congestion, carcasses, and traffic accidents. One New York expert of the 1890s concluded that by 1930, the horse droppings would rise to Manhattan's third-story windows. A public health and sanitation crisis of almost unimaginable dimensions loomed. Without horses, cities would quite literally starve. Doesn't this resemble today's global automotive fleet dependency? Well, all efforts to mitigate the problem were proving woefully inadequate. Stumped by the crisis, the Urban Planning Conference declared its work fruitless and broke up in 3 days instead of the scheduled 10. Article in 1894, the Times stated, in 50 years, every street in London will be buried under 2.8 meters of horse manure. There really are the same headlines our governments and environmentalists are shouting to the people today. If we do, you have to understand the facts of the time. 15,000 horses died on the streets of New York in a year, 41 per day. Horse stables with 100,000 capacities like today's park and ride system or shopping mall parkings, 500 horses per square kilometer. It's like getting the cars out of the city today. New York had 100,000 daily horse traffic. Horses emitted 1,800 tons of manure per day and 150,000 liters of urine per day. 200 fatal accidents per year, which is, well, 75% more than today's numbers per capita in New York. New York rose in 1900s. Great human crowding mean greater horse crowdings as well, and problems that might have been tolerable in a separately populated rural region became unbearable in densely packed urban one. It was 11,000 horse taxis or 4,000 horse buses. Imagine 12 horses per bus, totaling in 50,000 horses. And additionally, 50,000 ordinary horses per day in London, so 120,000 horses. By 1853, New York horse buses carried 120,000 passengers per day. Needless to say, this required a tremendous number of horses. So by 1890, New Yorkers took 297 horse car rides per capita per year. The consequences of the horse pollution population boom were sobering. While the horse may be a charming and ever romantic animal, when packed into already teeming and unsanitary cities, its environmental byproducts created an intolerable situation. What goes, well, must come out. And horse consumption and emissions. Imagine horse eats 3.5 kilograms of oats per day or 6 kilograms of hay per day. So 9 to 23 kilograms of manure per day. So that's like, doesn't this resemble the NOx of diesel? Hey, 4.4 liters of urine per day. So it's like ice cars emitting CO2. Life cycle of the transport of the horse was just 2 to 3 years. That's way less than cars today, of course. To produce fuel for one horse, you needed 2 hectares of fertile land. That could actually feed the same land for 8 people. New York had a horse population of 175,000 in 1880. Ever rapidly growing cities became dependent on more and more horses to sustain the transport, logistics, economy, but they polluted more and more the streets to the level that cities became trapped in their own growth. Unable to control and get rid of emissions, huge issues with health and safety, ever-growing concerns of the citizens pushed the city governing body finding solutions. Doesn't this sound to you as EU fight for strict emission reductions today? Well, the horse pollution problem was not a new one. Julius Caesar banned horse-drawn carts from ancient Rome between dawn and dusk in an effort to curb gridlock, noise, accidents, and other unpleasant byproducts of the urban equine. The sound as modern city diesel bans or car bans in the cities? Well, urban streets were minefields that needed to be navigated with the greatest care. Crossing sweepers, the guys, stood on the street corners for a fee. They would take you across the street to other side. Wet weather turned the streets into swamps and rivers of muck, but dry weather brought little improvement. The manure turned into dust, which was then whipped up by the wind, choking pedestrians and coating buildings. Horse manure is the favorable breeding ground for the housefly, and clouds of flies hatched in it. One estimated that 3 billion flies hatch in horse manure per day in US cities in the 1900s. Moreover, thanks to the skyrocketing horse population, even when it had been removed from the streets, the manure piled up faster than it could be disposed of. Municipal street cleaning services were incapable. The stockpiles of manure in city locations grew even to 22 meters high. Imagine that. This unsuccessful fight of CO2 reductions today to reach 2030 targets is already impossible by mathematical means. Suddenly people were saved. But how, would you ask? Well, take a look. It was the car. Contemporary observers concluded that cars were cheaper to own and operate than horse-drawn vehicles, both for the individual and for society. In 1900s, 4,192 cars were sold in the US. By 1912, that number had risen to 356,000. In 1912, traffic counts in New York showed more cars than horses for the first time. This is exactly to this example of car fleet electrification and its solution for modern polluting combustion engine traffic. Well, see the advertisements. Buy Ford, stop horse pollution. Buy electric, end pollution. Well, the horses were not replaced all at once, but by function by function. Freight haulage was the last bastion of horse-drawn transportation. The motorized truck finally supplemented the horse cart in the 1920s. That's so true today, where we see clearly that the heavy commercial trucks will be the last one to switch to zero emissions transport due to technological challenges what they face. As difficult as it may be to believe for the modern observer, at the time the private automobile was widely hailed as an environmental saver. Per vehicle and per mile, it seems highly likely that the environmental problems caused by the horse were far greater than those of the modern car. Horse even contributed to global warming. Manure released methane gases, a greenhouse gas 8 times more potent than CO2. So just in 10 to 20 years, horses were swapped by ice cars, and you see here just one car among the all horse carriages. Well, here's just one horse carriage among all the cars on the street. So that's how fast it happened. Well, what new breakthrough will save us from ourselves next, you might ask. Will it be electric, fuel cell, CNG maybe, plugins, or hybrids, or maybe the internal combustion? Well, see that the first self-propulsion vehicle was actually an EV, not an ICE, which is ironical as this is exactly what will save us from the CO2 overload today. We will look back at this moment of complete industry switch to electric vehicles as the only right natural solution to the global ICE transport problem. And we'll wonder how we could drive these old dinosaur combustion engine technology vehicles, same way we are looking at horses as means of transportation. We are here right now, experiencing the horse to ICE to EV switch. It will be such a no-brainer later looking back from the EV era to the old school ICE internal combustion engine period. See more and read the full story. All the credit goes to this article and some other information. Thanks.